I feel like everybody's got that one thing in games that they pay special attention to. Something small or subtle that nonetheless makes or breaks their experience. For some, it might be the lighting systems, the ways in which shadows and rays of light interact with one another and the environment. For others, it might be the game's ragdoll physics, because, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good ragdoll? But for me, it's the rain. I've always loved rain. Some of my fondest childhood memories are of sitting in the living room, a book in my hands, while a thunderstorm pounded away at the windows. I loved watching the drops race down the glass and listening to the rhythmic tapping and the distant rumbling of thunder. There's just something about it I've always found incredibly soothing. As I found out while researching for this video, there's even a term for people like me, pluviophile, someone who finds peace in the rain, who thrives in the atmosphere that always accompanies a storm. Naturally, this love of inclement weather carries over to the medium of video games too. Any game that has rain instantly gets a score boost in my book, and the more realistic, the more immersive, the better. Today I want to talk about some of my favorite video game rain, those storms that make me feel the same way I did on those rainy days in my childhood home. But before we can talk about those games, we have to talk about some less exciting rain. One of the earliest games to feature rain was 1981's Utopia for Intellivision. As with most games from that era, Utopia was fairly simple. It's a two-player game in which each player controls one island and competes to build a better kingdom than the other. They can do this by constructing buildings, planting crops, or funding terrorist activity on their rival's island. All of this, however, costs gold, and one of the only ways to get gold is through farming. And to farm, you'll need rain. You'll need a storm to pass over your crops, a torrential downpour to feed your kingdom, a very underwhelming rain cloud sprite. Yep, that's it. It was 1981, how much could you really expect? Despite the rainstorm's vital importance as a win condition, it really doesn't get any special fanfare. The rain shows up, moves in a straight line, and then disappears. And sure, this is in large part because the game was released in 1981 on the Intellivision of all things. But while Utopia's rain might be visually very underwhelming, it represents rain in a way I find quite compelling. This is one of the first games to feature rain, and it makes the rain a central component of the gameplay loop. Without rain, you cannot possibly hope to win. You need rain to succeed. Utopia's rain may have been rudimentary, but it helped to lay the groundwork for how games could effectively use weather to enhance their setting. By the early 1990s, weather in games had come a long way. Around this time, developers had begun to explore the idea that weather could directly enhance the feeling of a game, the player experience itself. Rather than being purely functional, the virtual rain of the 1990s sought to add to the game's atmosphere and setting. No longer were rainstorms minuscule sprites. They were beginning to move front and center. One of the first games to feature this style of rainstorm was 1990's Radmobile, a racing game developed by Sega that, fun fact, contains the first ever appearance of Sonic the Hedgehog, right up there in the rearview mirror. This game came out about 8 months before Sonic's debut title. One of the main selling points of Radmobile was its immersive weather and time of day systems, which could be combated with activatable windshield wipers and headlights, respectively. While the game itself may not have been overly well received critically, it does represent a paradigm shift in the industry as far as weather is concerned. At this point, rain was no longer a mere sprite used to convey gameplay mechanics. It had become one of the main focal points of the atmosphere of games. Nowhere in the 90s gaming space is this paradigm shift more obvious, in my opinion, than the opening to The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past opens with Link receiving a telepathic cry for help from Princess Zelda. Right from the beginning, you can hear the rain pounding on the roof. When you go outside, the storm fully envelops you. It gets louder, thunder flashes periodically, and unlike Utopia, it is impossible to miss the rain. It fills the entire screen, flying diagonally downwards and landing on the ground with these little splashes that really help to sell the storm's realism, at least as much as A Link to the Past can be considered realistic. This, combined with Zelda's pleas for help, creates a very effective tension, a sense of isolation that's almost palpable. It is, for its time, a remarkable introduction to a remarkable game. And then there's Metal Gear Solid 2. Released just a decade after A Link to the Past, Metal Gear Solid 2 opens with Solid Snake infiltrating an oil tanker off the coast of New York to deal with a new Metal Gear variant titled Metal Gear Ray. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and while I would love to explain why Snake is there, I will restrain myself because I'm here to talk about the rain. It is absolutely pouring, and for the PS2, this rain looks incredible. I replayed the opening mission on my physical PS2 in preparation for this video, and even in 2025, it's incredibly easy to get completely immersed in the setting, an impressive feat for a game that released almost 25 years ago. Arguably even more than A Link to the Past, Metal Gear Solid 2 represents a huge leap forward in game's ability to use rain to convincingly tell a story. As the intros of A Link to the Past and Metal Gear Solid 2 both demonstrate, rain is often used to evoke tension and isolation, casting an atmosphere that immediately pulls the player in and makes everything feel heavier. However, this is not always the case. As you may have guessed, none of these games represent my favorite instances of rain in video games. This isn't to say any of them are bad, per se, because they are certainly powerful in their own contexts, but they don't strike me emotionally in the same way as those childhood thunderstorms once did. You know what game does do that? Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing has been a part of my life for well over a decade, serving as a sort of gentle constant throughout different stages of life. My introduction to the series was New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS, with a town I still check in on to this day, if only to see what's changed in my time away. Great news though, my favorite villager, Sheldon, still resides in my humble town to this day. I played New Horizons when it came out, and honestly didn't like it nearly as much, although I still enjoyed it, just in smaller doses. I've since gone back to the older titles and given them each a try, and while New Leaf remains my favorite for reasons both nostalgic and mechanical, there is one aspect of every Animal Crossing game that I have universally enjoyed: the rain. Rain in Animal Crossing is unlike rain in any other game I've discussed so far. It's not an obstacle to be dealt with like in Radmobile, nor is it oppressive like in A Link to the Past. If I could use only one word to describe the rain in Animal Crossing, it would be comforting. There's just something about the storm that feels safe, almost like the world is taking a deep breath and inviting you to pause with it. Maybe it's the completely calm and friendly environment the game takes place in, maybe it's the visual style. I'm honestly not entirely sure. What I do know is that when I was younger, I would reset my 3DS's date and time again and again to stay in the rain just a little bit longer, letting the drops patter on digital rooftops as I wandered my town aimlessly. Even now, I go to sleep listening to the rain music from across the series. The rain in Animal Crossing has been a small sanctuary that has quietly endured alongside me through the years, and for that, I am grateful in a way that is difficult to put into words, yet impossible to ignore. So far in this video, we've looked at rain as a gameplay function, rain as a set piece, and rain as a comfort. But what does it look like when the game's rain is overtly hostile? Rain World is a difficult game to sell somebody on, not because it's lacking in quality or artistic merit, but because it's one of those games that, like Dark Souls, you have to really want to play. See, the thing is, Rain World absolutely hates the player. You aren't given any assistance, nor are you handed any sort of key to success. Every bit of progress you make in this game is hard fought. Literally everything in the world will try to kill you. You are the bottom of the totem pole in this ecosystem. Fragile and expendable, just a small creature desperately trying to carve out space in a world that does not care if you live or die. At the center of this hostile environment is, as the name implies, rain. No longer is rain a simple weather phenomenon, it is instead an extinction-level threat that crashes down in devastating torrents. It is a countdown clock that transforms exploration into desperation. As soon as the first drops start to fall, panic sets in. Unlike other games where rain signals melancholy or sets a mood, In Rain World, it signals an inescapable and absolute death. Rain is the one thing in Rain World that cannot be overcome. Your natural predators can be outsmarted or evaded, difficult terrain can be navigated with persistence, but the rain cannot be beaten. All you can do is scramble to the nearest den and pray that you make it in time. So now we've gotten a good look at some examples of rain in games, including one of my personal favorites, Animal Crossing. But at this point in the video, I've got to come clean. As much as I adore the gentle, peaceful rain of my little town, it's not my absolute favorite use of rain in a video game. You want to know what it is? That's right, you've been tricked into watching a video about Death Stranding. So before we even begin talking about why I love the rain in Death Stranding so much, we have to establish some background context, which is harder than you might think for a Hideo Kojima game. To start, Death Stranding establishes that there is a world of the living and a world of the dead. The world of the living is our world, and the world of the dead is, well, the afterlife. Connecting these two worlds is something called the beach, where all deceased souls must pass through to reach the world of the dead. If a soul fails to pass through the beach, it gets spat back out into the world of the living as a beached thing, or BT for short. After a cataclysmic event known as the Death Stranding, BTs began appearing in the world of the living en masse. This was problematic because BTs are made of antimatter, which means that if they come in contact with a living person, they will cause a massive explosion known as a void out. Still with me? Good. See, wherever BTs are, something called timefall follows. Timefall is precipitation, generally rain, although it's also seen as snow and hail in-game, that rapidly ages anything it touches. Timefall is, of course, the focus of this segment of the video, so I promise we are now done with the exposition dump. What I find particularly interesting about the rain in Death Stranding is that it somehow manages to encompass every single category of rain I've talked about so far. It takes after Utopia's rain because it serves a gameplay function. If timefall touches your cargo, it will rapidly degrade, which risks a lower delivery grade and therefore fewer rewards. So you have to prepare carefully and either plot a different route or bring plenty of container repair spray. In this way, it also takes after Rain World's more hostile precipitation. It's also similar to the set-piece rain of Radmobile, A Link to the Past, and Metal Gear Solid 2, especially Metal Gear Solid 2 given that Kojima made both games. And this is pretty obvious, I mean, just look at it. It sets the tone of your journey as a porter. I've rarely felt as immersed as I was on my first playthrough of Death Stranding, trying to valiantly power through a rainstorm to get my cargo to its destination. In an odd way, I think Timefall also takes after Animal Crossing's rain. On your final major delivery, the game asks you to backtrack across the entirety of the United States, and it is constantly raining. By this point, the player has dealt with Timefall plenty of times, and they are likely to have very little cargo, so the rain becomes little more than a soothing, steady beat as you undergo the final stretch of your journey. What really elevates Timefall above any other video game rain for me, though, is what it represents. It's very pretty rain, yes, but it goes much further than that. Death Stranding is, at its core, a game about connection. It is about building and rebuilding the bonds that connect us as people, even if we know those bonds must eventually break. Timefall is the antagonizing force to this idea. Nothing is immune to its effects. The cargo you carry on your back, the structures you build to help other players, even the people you interact with. All of it is susceptible to the entropic decay that Timefall brings with it. And yet, sitting in the safety of my Timefall shelter and watching the rain wash over the landscape, I can't help but think back to those childhood days spent reading with a storm tapping on the window beside me. I recall comforting my sister, who was terrified of thunder. I recall my childhood dog curling up beside me. I recall running through a thunderstorm to get back to my dorm room. All these connections, enabled by rain, are returned to me as though in spite of what Timefall represents. In the end, I think that's what makes Death Stranding's reign so unforgettable to me. Timefall embodies decay and loss, yet through it I'm reminded of the small, fragile moments of connection that give those endings meaning. Rain in games can be a mechanic, a set piece, a comfort, or even a threat, but in Death Stranding it becomes something greater. A reminder that, though everything around us is eroded by time, the bonds we make, no matter how brief, still matter.